Okay, we're gonna wait until it's 12 o'clock. Hello, everybody. I'm going to not really pay a lot of attention later to the messages, guys, not out of disrespect, but I'm nervous enough as it is, so without reading what you guys write me all the time. Okay, so it is 12 o'clock, so let's get the show on the road. Um, Thanks again for everybody who took the time, or thanks again to everybody who took the time to tune in and to listen to take the time out of your day to listen to my talk. I'm Patrick Widmann. For those of you who don't know me, I live here in Mexico since about 13 years, and I'm one of the owners of Protect Dive Centers, heavily affiliated with the PSCI training agency as an ITE, and I'm on the board of advisors, as well as I own the licenses together with a business partner for Mexico and Hispaniola, and I'm creating diving equipment, designing diving equipment with a brand called X-Deep and risers with a brand called Seal. And my number one passion and calling in life is to explore submerged caves. So this is going to be the first episode of hopefully a few more where I'm going to talk about the exploration of caves in the Dominican Republic. Now, I know that the Dominican Republic is not very famous at this point for cave diving, which is really a big mistake because it is an unbelievable cool destination for cave diving because it has literally all types of caves there. You have really, really deep cave, so sub 100 meters, 300 feet. You have super pristinely decorated caves like Padre Nuestro that look like Mexico. You have river caves, high flow caves. You have really everything a cave diver's heart might look for. The only thing is, just most of the time, it's a little bit harder to get to the water because infrastructure hasn't really been developed that much, like we have it in Florida, France, or Mexico, for example. But for any one of you who would like to go cave diving in in the Dominican Republic, please just get in touch with me. I can put you together with the right people to drive you around there and show you the best of the cave diving the island has to offer. Maybe at this point, it would be a pretty good idea to ask you guys if everybody can hear me, like if the audio is okay, then just give me like a thumbs up or something. I'm going to see that in a couple of seconds. So, two things before we get started. First of all, the quality of the pictures in this presentation is not going to be very high. Most of this is really quite some time ago, so we are talking about like GoPro 1 or GoPro first generation footage with like limited support of video lights. So don't get your expectations too high to see these amazing pictures you're usually used to from my presentations. Also, unfortunately, my internet company has decided to put down the internet speed quite significantly, which means that I'm not really sure if it might get interrupted the talk or if this is going to run smoothly. So I'm hoping for the best here. Also, my laptop gets so crazy hot on this live stream, so I hope the air conditioner manages to deal with that. So I hope we can go through this without any major hiccups. Okay, so then before we are starting, I want to give a quick shout out. So as you know, being a diving instructor, you don't really make a lot of money. Dive centers by themselves don't make a lot of money, which also meant that we had, for example, when we had the swine flu in 2009, it basically meant that, I don't know, 70% of dive shops kind of like lost their business in this period of time. So we started quite early to campaign against that and asked you guys to help out with some donations for our staff, both local staff as well as diving instructors, because obviously local staff is with money wise not really doing that great, and then our instructors pretty much put all of their money into their own education, their own training, their own diving. So it's pretty rough time, specifically because even once traveling is going to be back open, it's going to take quite some time for us to get clients again and stuff like that. So yesterday was the first day that we could take the money that some of you gave to us to pay the first salary. And just from the bottom of my heart, I really, really, really want to thank all of you who gave us the possibility to be that support for our staff. So they know that they have, at least for the next couple of months, something secured, food-wise and house-wise and stuff, and we can try and sit through this as long as we can. So I don't know how to put this in words, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, none of you who were kind enough to support us with money could see the facial expression on the people's face when they received the money, and could not read the messages that we received. So really, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you so much for your contribution, not only through GoFundMe. Some of you also decided to just pre-book classes or wire deposit, even not knowing when this course is going to happen. So for your trust in us, and before I get too sentimental, I reckon we just gonna jump in. But I really, from all management, from all the staff, from all the people, we are unbelievably grateful to you and to your contributions. Good. So to talk about the Dominican Republic and exploration there wouldn't really make any sense without talking about Phillip Lehman, right? One of the founding members of the DRSS, the Dominican Republic Speleological Society, and my partner in crime as far as exploration goes, and really one of the three mentors I had in my life for life itself. So I was really fortunate that at the age of 19, when I had my second job as a dive professional, I met an Italian instructor named Luigi Annone, who unfortunately passed away about a year after us meeting, or 2 years after us meeting. But he basically was the first person who gave me the idea of being a diving instructor and pursuing it as a life's goal. Something that I'm going to be grateful to him forever, really. And basically, pretty shortly after this guy is Phillip Lehman, and then Hans Kaspersets, both very close friends of mine that basically are my life's coaches. Some of you might know I'm from a really tiny village in the Austrian Alps, and I have basic school education. So about running a business and how to live life, those two guys have been literally my mentors. So I owe them beyond imagination a lot of things. But so to talk a little bit about Phillip, what some of you, I guess nobody really knows, that actually Phillip is diving since he's a kid because of his father, who, believe it or not, is a double Oscar-winning underwater documentary filmmaker. And something that makes that even more special is, so basically his dad, I honestly can't tell you if it was the 70s or the 80s. I guess I honestly can't tell you, but pretty long time ago, Phillip's dad made those underwater movies in the Mediterranean and throughout Africa. And he was the first guy who would shoot a crab walking on the floor, and then he would create a sound effect for how the crab would walk, because it seemed pretty clear that a crab walking on the floor should make some sort of sound, right? Which is quite funny if you think about all of the movies that we are creating now, because usually stalactites or stalagmites, everything has their own unique little sound to it. So it's quite funny because sometimes I would be sitting with Phillip at the editing room, and he would be looking at a shot, and he would be like, so what type of sound do you think that formation would make? And I'm like, I have literally no idea what you're talking about. So he's an unbelievable creative person. So, but he's also an avid surfer, so he really didn't pursue the whole diving thing too much, only on times off. So we owe it to a pretty a low wave time when he get into diving a little bit more, and then basically did this semi cave dive from the ocean and had this near-death experience. And and thought maybe I should get proper training in cave diving, and then ended up doing a cave class in the Dominican Republic in backmount. It didn't take too much time for him to understand that backmount maybe is not for him the way to go, and so he decided to switch to side mount, kind of like self-taught, because that, at that time, at that point in time, there wasn't really a lot of sophisticated side mount classes out there. And the funny part is he made like a tips and tricks of side mount from the Dominican Republic Speleological Society video, which is somewhat controversial. So it got taken down from YouTube a couple of times, but I'm pretty sure if you do some search on the internet, you can still find it. So it's pretty funny. And then they ran into a guy who then said, hey, you guys are into cave diving, you guys are into side mount, you have to go to Tulum, Mexico, because there lives this crazy side mount cave guru named Kim Davidson. And so basically, Phillip grabbed his exploration partner, Thomas, that he started, like basically they started exploring right off the back. They did the cave course and started exploring basically. And then he came the first time to Mexico, met Kim. Kim completely and utterly blew their mind as far as configuration goes and stuff like that. So they're super impressed. And then also tell Kim, like, hey, Kim, so we have this exploration project in the DR called El Toro, which currently we have an end of line of 2.5 kilometers. And so it's a really, really long swim. So we're looking into getting scooters and going there, which then meant that he would be contacting me to get this cave course going. So Kim and I, at that moment, we didn't have Project Tulum yet, obviously, but we did have a team as in exploration. So him and I would be going exploring a lot lately in that time. So he would be like, hey, there's this guy, Phillip, who is this uber-duper explorer from the Dominican Republic, and he's looking for a guy to do his DPV course with. At that point in time, so that's like 2009, at that point in time, there weren't a lot of, DPV cave instructors around, I guess less than a hand, that would be teaching in side mount. So even the choice was not very, very big, but anyways, I ended up with getting the job. So basically Kim put me in touch with Phillip, which at this point I haven't met Phillip yet. And to all of you who know Phillip, this is going to make a lot of sense. So him and I haven't met at that moment. It didn't stop him though to call me at least once a week and talk with me for 3 hours about some cave that he has found. So imagine this, some person that you have never met in your life spends hours with you on the telephone talking about things that you've never seen. So it's a funny part because he has so much passion to talk about those things that it was really completely impossible not to listen to him and to get to spend this time talking to him. The only thing that I remember also from this time, I had a lot of fights with my girlfriend because he would call it random moments when we were just about to go into a restaurant to eat something. Or so that's some pretty cool memories. So anyways, the course didn't happen in 2009 because Phillip was exploring a cave that had a dry section to it. And there was this big rock and they were worried about it collapsing. So they decided to kick it free with his leg, which then made the entire slope collapse and he fell down with it and he tore his ACL, which meant no more diving. He had to get surgery and whatnot. Still didn't stop him from calling me though, like all the time and talking for 1 hour about his progress in rehab and whatnot. So all of that was quite funny. So in late 2010, finally, Phillip is all good and he comes back to do a class. And I only remember it was really cold that winter, so we had to hide a lot from the wind chill. But so basically, I only know the story from these super hardcore explorers in the DR that do a 2.5 kilometer swim with I don't know how many stages. Because I always told him like, hey, at ProTech, a prerequisite for doing a DPV class is you have to do stage class before. And it's like, no, yeah, well, but I'm super experienced in stage diving. So it's like, okay, I guess we can take your experience and move from there. So basically my fault. The first day we started off with quite a lot of theory because I thought the water stuff is going to be easy. So we spent until like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon just doing theory, talking about like brushed engines and brushless engines and different type of battery technologies and whatnot. And by the time we arrived in the water and I asked the guys to put their equipment together, I recognized or realized pretty fast that, yeah, maybe we should have started with a bit more of the basics. So the course shook Philip a little bit because he realized all the things that he did not know. And so he took the decision to put the exploration project back home on ice and did consecutive trips to Mexico to just train and practice with me. We did stage class and we did a multi-stage class and we did advanced side mount, small cave, tank off restrictions, surveying and stuff like that to get him a little bit more sharp as an explorer. So he's also incredibly dedicated to practicing everything that he does to like the nth degree, which for an instructor is always really nice, of course, to see that your students are really truly putting a lot of effort into what they do. So from the very beginning, also from a humor point of view, we kind of like hit it off and became friends fairly quickly. So from the very beginning, he always said, "Hey, Patrick, you have to come to the Dominican Republic because the cave diving here is really amazing and you have to check it out and whatnot." But my financial situation at that moment was I had just become or just bought into Protec to be a part owner. And Protec Tulum was somewhere on the horizon. So there was absolutely not even a remote chance for me to muster the money to do that. So it took a couple of more years until I turned 30 in 2012. And so together with my mom, thank you, Mom. Mom was always my big supporter. Together with my mom, we made the decision that my birthday present is going to be the flight to the Dominican Republic, which I remember like it was yesterday, was $748 with American Airlines through Miami. So I'm all super stoked and doing my first trip to the Dominican Republic, which also meant was the first dive I did in El Toro, and I was blown away and it was love on first sight. So let's talk a little bit about the history of El Toro itself. So the first dive ever done in El Toro was in 2008, and it was done by Bettina, Phillip, and Thomas. And these guys basically by accident stumble upon this really massive collapse in the jungle floor and then walk down and find water. So you need to understand that Philip and Thomas have just been cave certified. So they really don't know a lot about what they're doing. And they find like basically the treasure chest at the end of the rainbow. And basically the story of the name is as Philip walks back up, they find like this really big bull at the very entrance, which then ultimately meant that they would call this cave El Toro, which is translated, Spanish translated to the bull. Now, what is quite interesting when you look at the picture, so you can see that it's a pretty big dry cave entrance. The rocks are all covered in moss, which makes it pretty slippery to walk down. And it's also quite a distance from the edge of the collapse until you walk all the way down, approximately like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I would reckon. And something really nice on the way down, you have a figurine carved into the rock by Taino Indians. So the Taino Indians were the original inhabitants of Hispaniola Island. So Hispaniola is the name of the island, and it's basically split into two countries, Haiti and Dominican Republic, which is some conflicted story, which you might want to, it's also an interesting story if you're keen, then just do a little bit of research on Google about the independence of the Dominican Republic from Haiti and how this two cultures that speak different languages also, Dominican Republic is Spanish and Haiti is Creole, which is like a sort of French. It's quite an interesting story. So of course, you seeing some ancient stuff carved in rocks is always quite a cool and interesting thing. So Philip and I also have like this little ceremony that we do at that thing every time we jump in before we jump in the water, which is weird like that. And then you're at the bottom. So this is the entrance, which a couple of things that you see right away. First of all, crystal clear water. The water is steel blue. The entrance kind of looks small on that picture with the two divers in it. It's actually, I don't know, when you stand there, it feels definitely bigger. And from the moment you put your head underwater, it's just crazy massive. It is a super ultra power tunnel leading off in one direction. So I'm sorry if I'm kind of like exposing Philip a little bit. But the story is that Philip was dressed faster than everybody else. So he goes like, which is quite weird thinking about it now because Philip is always the slowest in absolutely everything except surfing. But basically, he like goes underwater and he just sees like this thunder power tunnel and goes like, "Nah, dude, I'm not gonna do this alone." And like turned around and came back to the surface to meet with his friends. It's quite funny when you told me that. And another thing to mention at this point: water temperature is a little bit colder than in Mexico, with about 22 degrees centigrade, which is some 71-ish Fahrenheit. So definitely a little bit colder. Which at the time, though, you see everybody's in wetsuits except me. Which we're going to cover a little bit later, some more about wetsuit versus dry suit there. Good. Now comes like an array of like a little bit more professionally made pictures. Don't get your hopes up too much. They are the only ones. But it gives you really a nice impression about how the cave looks like. So you can definitely see on the walls already that there's a lot of mechanic erosion going on. So there is no formation, no stalactites, no stalagmites. Everything is kind of like smooth and carved out. And in many places, you can actually see how the water used to rush through the tunnels. Something that makes El Toro, for me, very special, and it really gives it a super special place in my heart, my memory, my head, whatever you want to call it, are the colors, though. So first of all, the water is steel blue. Then you have this completely and utterly white, sometimes looks like hand chiseled walls that make the blue pop really good. And then you have a lot of like clay type, fine grained brown ochre sediment. And the mix of those three colors is just like non-stop mind blowing. So as we swim, there's really hardly ever, or scooter, I prefer scooter by the way, there's really hardly ever a moment when the cave gets dull or boring. It's just non-stop discovering new parts that you really like. So for me, for sure, the colors is one of the things that makes this cave like one of the top caves in the world for sure. It also like pinches down, then it opens back up. So sometimes you have this incredible vast rooms. And again, right here in the middle, you can see all of this brown dome. That's all sediment. So it's just a testament to how much water used to run through El Toro, depositing all of this sediment and debris and material along its way. So specifically when you see like the flow marks on it, how the water used to rush through it, I don't know, this is for sure something for me as a cave diver and explorer that really excites me and that just kind of like looks cool and also gives you the feeling a little bit of time travel because you try to imagine at what time water used to rush through there. And so, yeah, it definitely always gives me a little bit like a time traveling experience. The one, or another thing, let's call it another thing that makes El Toro truly and utterly, absolutely special is the halocline. In fact, I'm going to just lay it out there. It is the best halocline that I have seen in all the world until to date. First of all, because of the really, so what is a halocline for those of you who don't know? So it's basically the interface between two different types of waters. One has more salinity, the other one has less. They're also in difference in temperature usually, pH value, water chemistry, and a difference in salinity, which gives them a different density also. That causes that if you disturb the halocline, you get like a blurry vision because the water gets broken or refracted at different speeds. So this happens really drastically in El Toro, which I'm going to show you in a second. in a different picture. And the other thing that is quite funny now, here in Mexico, the salt water is warmer. So usually, remember I told you everybody's in wetsuits. So first trip that I did, I was in a wetsuit too. But it's like, so you're in the wetsuit, you see the salt water, and it's just like, whoa, I'm cold. I just want to go in the warm salt water. And you hit the saltwater layer, and you realize it's actually colder than the fresh water. So that's a complete anticlimax right then and there. And you regret the decision that you made going into the saltwater real fast. The other thing that makes it so unbelievable special is there is a bacteria colony that lives in certain areas and certain saltwater passages of El Toro. And this is like really some weird bacteria. Like we have like, and I'm kidding you not, we have like top grade scientists studying that stuff. So this bacteria creates a lot of tannin. So to explain tannic acid is quite easy. If you take a glass of water and you throw the tea bag in it, the water is going to absorb the tannin from the tea, and then the water is going to change its color to whatever was in the tea. Okay, so pretty much like that. So this bacteria creates like a opal green effect. So usually here in Mexico, when we teach in most of you who did cave training with Protec at one point or another were diving in a place called Protec, which has a really, I was diving in a place called Ponderosa, which has a really, really very distinct, very special halocline. In fact, once you're in the salt water and you look up, it actually looks like you look at the water surface because the fresh water is running right on top of your head, and you can see like the waves in the salt water, so in the halocline. So it makes it really, really, really special. But on top of that, here in El Toro, the color is also different. So it makes this completely and utterly different effect between freshwater and salt water. So first of all, you can see it on the picture. It looks very distinct, the two different types of waters. But besides, you have such a strong difference in the reflection of light that when you swim next to your buddy, it almost looks like his arm is broken or it comes out of his belly because it's just not really attaching to where it's supposed to attach to. So that is quite an interesting scenario, and the first time you see it, it's quite cool. Now, however, you can imagine that through this opal green water, visibility is really diminished. Imagine basically to do your dive now below the halocline. In the picture you see right now, you have the fresh water on top and the salt water on the bottom, but there is parts of the cave that are completely in the salt water, which means that you're basically stuck with that visibility. So put yourself in the mindset of somebody that just got certified as a cave diver and then stumbles across this massive cave and starts exploring it. And then suddenly, after a few hundred meters, you come into this tunnel that looks like it's a dead end, and it's just really bad visibility. And there's no place to tie off onto because all the floor is clay. So you can imagine how hectic that must have been for the guys back then. Obviously, none of them having a lot of experience, right? People that do their cave training with us here in Mexico, they get a lot of experience in halocline, right? Because it's part of the training. But for these guys, that was absolutely new territory. In the same time, it is quite difficult for us now traveling with a scooter through it. Now, this is all things that we learn here in Mexico, but there's also in that some sections there's kind of like limited space. So if you look at the diver here, so this is that blurry vision that you get when you disturb or intermix that halocline. So imagine you cruise through it heavily loaded with equipment with a scooter. You can imagine how much turbulence you create and how much mixing of those two waters and blurry vision you're creating with it. So you can imagine if I would drive behind somebody, I would literally not see anything. So we learn how to split the team up in different places that everybody can still see where they're going. In the same time, trying to follow a very, very thin, white, sometimes brown stained line makes it, the halocline there definitely makes that quite challenging. This, amongst other reasons, has a cause. If you look at that picture and you look at Phillip's fins there and you go straight up from the fins, you can see the guideline. So usually here in Mexico, the guidelines are more laid to the floor because it's easier to follow them visually as you swim over them, right? My eyes are mounted to the front of my head, not to the back of my head. However, in that area, the idea was to keep the line out of the bad visibility saltwater. As well, if you look right underneath Phillip, you will realize that the floor is actually not floor. It's just massive amount of clay sediment. So if you would get too close to that or do a wrong finning technique or something like that, you would cause instant bad to zero to no visibility. Quite often people tell me, like specific on rebreather diving, they go like, well, it is impossible for visibility to get so bad that you can't see a HUD or your computer. And I can guarantee you, hand on the Bible, that in El Toro in the bacteria tunnel, I placed back then was HID, but like I placed a 10-watt HID light on my mask glass and I couldn't see the glow of light. Like I literally thought my light had failed. So that is definitely possible as far as bacteria goes. So the idea was to keep the line out of that layer and a bit more towards the ceiling, which is something that I would like you to just keep in your memory for a split second, because I'm going to come back to the line and the ceiling part in just a bit. But having really proper technique in a place like this, a flat trim, arched back, proper finning technique is really absolutely important for your safety in cave diving. So many of the things that we experience and learn on exploration is something that we then can bring back and then teach to our students or share with instructor candidates. Great. So basically back then the project ended with a team consisting of Thomas and Oleg making it to a dry cave at the end of the line, 2.5 kilometers from the entrance. And pretty much later, a bit of time later, the DRSS was formed. And much more later, Phillip and I met. And even more later, so this picture right now is in 2013. The circle had finally closed, which was really something special for me, because at the end of the day, I had only met Phillip because of the El Toro project, right? And then El Toro was laid on ice, and now finally here we are, him and I together exploring this really amazing cave. Now you might ask yourself, well, if you were so excited, Patrick, why you make such a really horrible face on that picture? Now, when I came the first time to the Dominican Republic, I came for cave exploration, cave diving, right? So Phillip picks me up from the airport. We go home to his place. We eat something. And he's like, so we're going to go to bed at 10 because tomorrow we wake up at 4. And I'm like, what? And he was like, well, swell is really good. So we're going to wake up, we're going to do yoga, and then we're going to go surfing. And I'm like, whoa, bro. I just took all my birthday money to buy a flight ticket to come here. I'm not interested in surfing, mate. I just want to go cave diving. And he goes like, well, it sucks to be you then. I have organized you a surf instructor, be there or be square. I'm going anyways. So that's a little bit of Phillip for you there. Always ready to set his priorities. Anyways, however, he has really heavily gotten me into surfing back then, which I'm super grateful for. And he's gotten me into yoga. So to get back to my face, this morning he woke me up also at 4 o'clock, and we did a yoga session, which ended in a headstand, which I royally screwed up and completely and utterly destroyed my neck and pinched a nerve. So basically, you see how my head is like somewhat bent to the side? That was my posture for the entire week. Remember the picture before where you could see the line being like up in the ceiling? So imagine that same body posture that Phillip had, flat trim, just you're going with a scooter at a pretty high speed, and you try to follow a line that's higher up than your eyes, but your neck hurts like there's no tomorrow. Then you get a bit of an idea of what I went through that day. A couple of more things about the picture. You see Crucito there, which is our local guide and scout, the guy that has found us a lot of caves in the area. And you can also see the bags in front of us. So basically, at that point, 4 people had been to that dry cave at the end of the line, 2.5 kilometers in. Yet, although it was 4 people, the stories about it were somewhat myth-like. Somehow nobody really remembered, but yet the stories we got was like, well, it's a really small place to get out of the water, and or like the surface of the water is a really small place, and the rock wall goes vertically straight out of the water. You can't even, like, you have to basically ascend a vertical wall straight out of the water. So that is what we prepared for. Now, me as well as everybody else in Project, we are really very big and firm believers into teamwork. So, and into preparation with a team as well. So basically, I came to the DR quite some time before, considering I had absolutely zero experience in dry caving at that moment, minus some little tools that the Austrian cave rescue team took me on. But I was basically like on the phone with them every day, asking them. Also, they recommended all of the stuff we should buy, from the drill to the hooks and whatnot. And then we would spend a week in Phillip's house, just ascending and descending and drilling holes and practicing all the stuff that we needed for this upcoming vertical ascent, 2.5 kilometers away from the surface, straight out of the water. So we definitely had 7 times more equipment than we needed, and maybe 10 times more practice from this specific skill, because the one thing that we have learned, besides teamwork, for things like this, you should always over prepare. Have more than what you need, be more prepared than what you need, practice, 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 practice. Because once you're in a place where rescue is really far, you don't want to find yourself in a spot where rescue is needed. So basically, that's all the stuff that we have in the bags in front of us. There's a drill in it, 60-meter ropes, hooks, and whatnot. Then all of this equipment, very important, sorry, I forgot almost, very important team member. Sorry, oh my God, sorry, how could I screw this up? Besides Phillip and I, of course, very, very important team member was Jessica, late Jessica, who unfortunately passed away. But for us, dogs specifically, and I can't highlight that enough, blue pit bulls are incredibly important exploration dogs. Here you can see Jessica as a safety diver on standby, absolutely dedicated to her job, mask to the ready, inside on equipment. The tanks were waiting in the water, so just in case you're asking why she doesn't have any tanks on. But really absolutely important. So if you are an upcoming cave explorer, but you don't have a lot of success yet, and you wonder why, I can only recommend you getting a cave dog, specifically blue pit bull. And at this point, I have to give you a really, really important advice. So if you have an Instagram account, you want to look for Rosie Pitiboo, Rosie written with IE, and you want to follow Rosie on her amazing adventures of cave exploration around the world. So really, blue pit bull is the race when it comes to cave exploration. Good, so back to another animal, the donkey. Now, back then, I thought mounting really expensive equipment to donkeys was quite ridiculous. Nowadays, I'm really used to it. And we've mounted equipment to other things that were even worse. But when I came to Mexico the first time in 2005, and I heard all of these tales about like Chuck Mall and other places where you would, get with the car, get off the highway, and then at the entrance, they would rent you like donkeys to bring your equipment all the way to the water. And the stories of that I found absolutely fascinating. The adventure. I mean, don't get me wrong. I really thoroughly enjoy to drive my car all the way up to the water's edge and almost back roll from my truck into the water. But in the same time, I also felt that I was a little bit robbed by being too young. I was a little bit robbed by that adventurous time in Mexico. So having the possibility to relive that, but in a different country, I was really, and still am really, really grateful for that. So by now, I've spent, I don't know how many hours and hours and hours of my life hiking through the Dominican Republic with equipment mounted to donkeys and have gotten really extremely proficient and efficient in riding donkeys or horses for that matter. So what's happening? We're using donkeys, or actually only one donkey, truth be told. I'm going to do another talk about another place where we use several donkeys, but in that case, it's only one donkey. So we use one donkey to shuttle the heavy equipment, that first stretch that's pretty straight. We talk about like a half an hour walk. And then you have, or maybe 20 minutes, something like that. Now that I think about it, maybe it wasn't that long, but like 20 minutes. And then you come to a picket fence where we remove all of the equipment from the donkey and then it goes on our backs. And then it's a pretty short distance, like maybe 60, 70-ish meters, like, I don't know, 250 feet. And you come to the edge of that collapse. The collapse, by the way, has two caves. When you look down into the collapse, to the right is El Toro and to the left is another cave. And from there on, we put it on our backs and we do several trips down to the water's edge until all of the equipment is there. If there's any Australian cave divers listening to me right now, I know for you guys, all of that's completely normal and not interesting at all, because basically that's just how you cave dive. But for other people, it's quite heavy duty to carry all of the equipment that far to go on a cave dive. Some other things to mention: when you look out from El Toro upwards, you can see it's a pretty vast dry cave with the ceiling being, in some parts, surely like 30 meters overhead. And in the same time, remember, this is an active earthquake zone. So, I mean, all of you remember this massive earthquake that almost ripped Haiti apart, right? And Haiti is really not that far from where we are right now. So there's definitely some moments when you look up at a ceiling like that and you go like, well, if there's an earthquake right now, I don't think that this is like really the best place to be at right now. Maybe in another talk, I'm going to share with you how it was to be exploring a cave underwater during an earthquake. But yes, now we have everything in the water and off we go. So again, like, sorry for the quality of the picture. We talk about GoPro first edition. So as you can see, we are usually, right from the beginning, we're a bit heavily packed. 4 tanks, 2 scooters. Usually the procedure back then, when we didn't have gauges on the scooters for battery, we would like rotate scooters around to do like 20 minutes, 30 minutes on one scooter, then go to the other scooter and rotate them like that, to make sure that at max point of penetration, if one scooter would fail, you would have enough burn time in the other scooter to get you out. However, those were not those days. We only had one spare scooter, so with 3 scooters between 2 people. And also transporting them in and out of the cave was a hassle. So we tried to keep as much equipment that was not used in the cave. So back then we made the decision actually to basically leave that thing in the water and just try it out if it was working. In the same time, however, just that you know, we actually had 3 permanently staged tanks also that were in the cave besides all of the tanks that we were carrying. So we had enough gas also at that point for somebody, not 2 people, but for one person to actually swim all the way from the dry cave to the surface. So remember what I said before, as far as team preparation and over preparation go. Generally speaking, we always try within our team to be absolutely prepared for what we do, to have a solid what if list, to cover all of the plausible emergencies that we can imagine. I mean, I'm not going to prepare myself for an earthquake, for a plane crashing into the entrance, but anything that is quite plausible for me, that I think, this might happen, I want to have an answer to that what if list. In the same time, we also had to bring, of course, electric or electronically operated equipment to the dry cave, as in the drill and its batteries. So on this picture next to the scooter, you can see this black bag. Now this black bag actually is a dry suit zipper, and it has an inlet and an exhaust valve, just like a dry suit. So all of the electric equipment was in there, and we had to change its buoyancy, considering if we were in salt water and fresh water, which was quite a pain. Basically, this is what I keep on saying. There are certain things that you will never learn if you just do normal cave diving under exclamation marks. Certain things are just learned by exploring and trying out new things. So for me, this is always I always love to experience new things and to come up with new solutions, both as an explorer, but in the same time, then having the ability to take this new information, to bring it home, to teach it to my staff, to my instructor candidates, and then ultimately sharing it with other people, that they don't have to go through the same trial and error phase as we have gone through. At this point, so with all of the stopping, with the bag and stuff like this, it took us approximately still, I would say, like 1 hour to make it to the dry cave, which we see there. So as you can see, they were not lying. There is a sheer vertical wall coming straight out of the water. However, this is not where the cave continues. The cave continues right in front of me. So you even have like this little small ledge there where you can see the tanks right there. It's quite easy to climb onto. So to a certain degree, it was quite an anticlimax. But it was a relief and a total anticlimax. Now, I have told you that I have really, at this point in time, I've zero experience in dry caving. However, I'm from this really small town in the Austrian Alps, right at the foot of the tallest mountain in Austria called the Großglockner. And if you think that's a funny German word, then try to say it 10 times really fast. So I grew up with climbing and alpinism quite a bit. So when it comes just to the climbing aspect, I was pretty solid on that, and rope work and SRT and stuff like that. So honestly, from the moment I surfaced, I realized right away, I'm not going to need any ropes or any equipment to climb on top of that thing. So basically, I just got out of the water and climbed straight up to the top of the collapse. New experience, however, remember, is this a gas pocket, right? Some people call it air pocket, which I think gives like a bit of a wrong feeling because you don't really know if it's air. But it's a really vast, very big space. And so I basically just climb up to the top of it, and at the top of it, I get like this really heavy breathing. So my diving instructor is like, "Oh my God, this is CO2. I'm getting hypercapnic." And then my rational mind said, "You just climbed the 30-meter debris hill really fast in the excitement of thinking there's water on the other side. So maybe your cardio is just not what you think it is." So please remember, at this point in time, neither Phillip or I had been to that dry cave. And the 4 people that have been there before us never left the water. So we did not know if there is even going to be an exploration, right? They told us, you surface is a small place, it's 30 meters straight up, and then there is a hole, and then we don't know. So based on a hunch, right, I flew to the Dominican Republic. We bought 60-meter ropes, we bought drills, we bought anchors, we bought all this stuff. Well, honestly, Phillip bought all that stuff. So we bought all that stuff. I came to Phillip, we did all of this training and all of the practice. And then we crossed the island because Phillip lives in the north, but this cave is in the south. We crossed the island. We woke up early. I snapped my neck. We spent hours to get all the equipment to the water. We scooted there for 1 hour. We went through all of this trial and error with keeping the dry bag not flooding or getting too buoyant, without knowing if there is even going to be anything to explore. For Phillip, it must have been crazy. He has started this exploration 5 years ago, and since 5 years or 4 years, he did not know if it continues or not. So there is a lot of tension. There's a lot of excitement. Basically all of the things that make exploring really what it is. And on my way down from the top, I realized there was another edge around the corner. I turned to the right and I looked down and I saw this. Boom! I'm just going to let this sink in for a second. Remember all this time of preparation, all the blood, sweat, and tears of when you did not know, is it even going to go? Now, why do I highlight this so much? So many times in cave exploration, and I guess even in life, we already say no to things just because they feel like they might not lead to something positive at the end, right? So many times you feel like, well, I could do this, but you know what? It's most likely not going to pan out, so why even bother? And from a cave explorer point of view, now it's easy for me to share all of these cool videos about Madagascar and DR, and we went also to other places. So it's easy for me to share all of that. And it gives you the impression, like my Facebook gives the impression that I am somebody that, if for the people who know me, know I'm really not like that. But it gives the impression that every time we go somewhere, we have this, it's just like absolute highway cave and everything is awesome and we just keep on finding cave wherever we go. The reality could not be further from the truth. In fact, I would conservatively say that 95% of places we go to check out happen to go nowhere. And some horrible stories. If I'm going to do a talk about Tanzania, where I got almost killed by bees, a snake, parasites. It's the worst suffering ever, and we didn't find absolutely nothing. But I can also tell you that this remaining 5% of when it does go and it does continue and you do find something cool, makes all the pain, the suffering, the blood, sweat, and tears, makes all of that worthwhile in a heartbeat. And at the end of the day, I can truly tell you that if I think about my life and the moments that I felt the most happy and grateful and fulfilled, when I thought really there is a purpose for me of living here, was in moments just like this one. So I would recommend to all of you, no matter what it is in your life, if you think, if there's even the remotest odds that you're gonna pull it off, just go for it. Close your eyes, bite on your teeth, and just absolutely go for it. Groovy. Now, in that moment, I come back to see Philip, and I'm screaming, right? I'm like, and some of you that know me know that I have a really hard time to kind of like conceal my excitement or suppress my excitement. So usually when I get super crazy excited, I just scream like a mad person. On land, in my regulator, in my rebreather, no matter what, I just start screaming like a complete and utter madman. So I'm just hollering, Phillip! Phillip, it goes! There's a pool of water! And so I run back over, sort of run, and I'm like, Phillip, get your butt out of the water. You have to go over there and you have to check out the pool. And Philip looks in my face and he goes like, oh, this is really cool, but hey, we did enough today. Let's go back home. And I'm like, what? What? It's 5 years that you're waiting for that moment. 5 years. And you don't want to get your butt out of the water to cross over and to see if the cave goes. Now, to give you some explanation, remember when I told you that in 2009, Phillip was part of a dry cave collapse that tore his ACL. So he definitely has some post-traumatic stress in dry caving or about dry caves, which any one of you can just write him a message and say, hey, Phillip, how do you feel about dry caves? Which he really, from the bottom of his heart, hates. But in the same time, so something that I appreciate about Phillip so much, and I think which is one of the most amazing attributes to a team member, is that they will not succumb peer pressure just by calling them out or calling them a sissy or telling them to just, it's just like, no, I do not feel comfortable right now. I'm going to come out the next time we come here, but I will not go out of the water right now. And then you can have the best arguments in the world, stand on your head, spin around your own eye. He is not going to do what you want. He's just going to stick to what he wants. So this is really, I think, a great attribute to have a team member like this, because many times alpha males and alpha females are going to just push each other further and further and further and further and further and further and further until something bad happens. In a very recent body recovery that Philip and I were involved in the Dominican Republic, that literally seen what happened. There was two guys that almost kind of like kept on pushing each other to go further and further and go more and more crazy, which ultimately ended with a really tragic accident and them drowning in a completely crazy, small, zero visibility, hardcore section of a cave. So having somebody, a team member in that moment that's gonna pull the handbrake and go like, no, I will not do this is really important and a really great attitude. So if you can find somebody like this for your team, that would be important. So anyways, Philip said like, no, let's go back home. And I said to Philip, yeah, screw you. I'm already here. At least what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay or create the rope that leads over to help us. So I knew, or for me, it was quite easy to climb over without equipment. It was quite easy for me to climb over to the other side. But I thought that something like a via ferrata that we have, by the way, I'm pretty sure that I pronounced that wrong, so sorry to all the Italian audience. But I wanted to make like a via ferrata. So in the Alps, in many like hiking places, you have like a pretty thick metal wire that is bolted into the mountain on regular intervals. And people have a harness with two short ropes and carabiners. And they basically clip both carabiners into that metal wire, and then they walk until they come to one of these anchor points. And at these anchor points, they switch over one carabiner and then the other. So there is a moment when they're attached double, but basically that means that when they come to an anchor point and they have to unclip the carabiner, they're still always attached with one side. So that was my original plan, which turned out to be completely useless later. But anyway, so that was my thought. And so that was what I was trying to install. First tried if the electric drill still worked, which it did. A little bit of dentistry there. Maybe I had some caries that I wanted to get rid of. And off I went to install the rope, all the time while Philip, in a wetsuit, decided to not leave the water at all. So I'm drilling and drilling and drilling. So all of this takes me like at least an hour and a half, 2 hours to install all of the rope work. And on the way back, I'm stepping on a rock. The rock rolls over. And it was right on top of like a hole. So basically my foot goes down the hole and the rock rolls over and traps my ankle. Now the whole thing looked really dramatic because from 1 second to the next, I sank down like a knee deep. To be perfectly honest, if I would have lost balance and I would have fell in that moment, it would have been a bad day for my knee. But long story short, I thought this was an amazing moment to get Philip to come out of the water. So I scream and I'm like, Philip, I broke my ankle. Philip, rescue me. And Philip is like, dude, I told you, you shouldn't have pushed. We should have gone home. And you see like nervously take off. I'm like, Philip, hurry. I'm in so much pain. So Philip takes off the tanks, climbs out of the water with this beautiful knotted line that I made, gets out of the water, and then helps me to remove the rock together, and finds out that the rock weighs absolutely nothing and that I tricked him into leaving the water. However, though, there's with a quite good chance for my dry suit to get broken also, for example, if he would have not come out to help me. So it definitely served the purpose also. And to get this, so now he's out, right? We have the rubber boots there. So if you look at my feet, you realize that I wear actually like rubber boots, because to explain you dry cave floor, I don't know if you can imagine to pour like oil on ice, and that's about how slippery that stuff is. So we had his boots there. He was out of the water. Everything was ready to go. And I was like, so Philip, now let's walk on. The rope was installed. I'm like, Philip, you can hold on to the rope. We go to the other side and we check out this new pool. And Philip was like, yeah, no. And then turned his back to me and jumped back into the water. So that was quite interesting. Why did he feel that way? And also why did the first 4 people that came to that dry cave, why was their story of what they saw so different from what we found? In cave diving, we call this distance stress. When a person has the feeling to be really, really far away from safety slash, I always say alone, a long way from home. The further we go, the more this feeling increases of like being alone and far away from home. So this is not only distance related, it can also be based on like they have to climb in the middle. It's also depth related. And it's also size of the cave related. So it's something that is taught and learned in one part of the cave class called the psychological aspects of cave diving. Good. Of course, we still celebrate it. So now all the lines were installed. We also put the Dominican flag there because a few months before that, Dominican athletes had brought the flag to Mount Everest. So we thought our small contribution could be to bring the Dominican flag to the farthest place inside the Dominican Republic, which was the end of line in the Toro in that moment. Now, when you zoom in or look a bit closer to the picture, you realize that for somebody that basically just went out of the water for 30 seconds to take a rock off my foot and then jump back in the water, it's a bit weird that Philip's face is full of clay, almost making him look like a special force military operative that just crawled through the muck. Now, Philip has really absolutely no problem to entertain himself while he has to wait for other people. Usually he plays endless amounts of Angry Birds, but in that case, without his phone, while I laid the line, he decided to smear, and first of all, to eat also. I don't know if you forgot that, Philip, but he actually ate a piece of clay to absorb the powers of El Toro. I swear to God, this is how absolutely juvenile we are. But he smeared all of this clay in his face, and when I asked him, hey, why do you do this? He goes like, well, it's exfoliating. You know, it's rejuvenating. It's really good for your skin. And now when you look at my face, considering I'm like more than 10 years younger, and you look at all the wrinkles around my eyes, and considering that Philip has no wrinkles whatsoever, I guess he might be on to something. So now with this whole COVID thing happening, one of my new business strategies is I'm going to import this really unique, rejuvenating, exfoliating, special type of clay from the ends of lines of El Toro and then ship it to you. So I'm already taking your orders. So if any one of you wants to invest in some rejuvenating clay, I'm the guy to talk to. Now I'm aware that all of the time that while I'm talking about, you know, broken ankles and exfoliating clay, a lot of you were thinking, but what happened to the donkey that had to carry all of your heavy equipment to the edge of the water? Fear not, the donkey was taken care of. He had only the best of local grass, including bottled water. I think one time it was even Evian, however, I'm not 100% sure on that. But please know that in none of our explorations, any animals are getting harmed. Good. As most of the time in El Toro, we are back at the car at night. It's at this moment already 6 to 7 hours underground. The maximum we did was like 13 hours underground. I know that for most of the dry cavers listening right now that do multi-sump projects is not even a giggle because they spend weeks underground. However, for our first experience, it was pretty intense. There's two more things that I want to share about this picture. First of all, in case you ever get to dive with Philip and you come out and it's late and you're tired, do yourself a favor and don't ever fall asleep around him because you will regret it for sure. And the second thing is, even though they are not, and I repeat this, they are not my official sponsor, but I want to give a huge shout out to Nature Valley. Nature Valley's granola bars have saved my life on more than one occasion, in more than one country. In fact, a bit of a funny story about those bars. I always bring like heaps of those to Madagascar because we spend literally all day without eating. And I sell them there also to like Philip and the other guys when they're really hungry, and I sell them for like $50 a bar, and it's like I have no problem of making the sale. But so basically, when we started to use rebreathers in Madagascar, I brought 50 cubic foot, 7-liter steel tanks to Madagascar. So I had one box where I put the tanks, and then I filled the rest of the box with the granola bars, right? Because the tanks already took the weight that was allowed by the airline. So then how can I fill the rest of the box? Or just throw granola bars that fill the space but don't weigh anything. Uh, Big shout out also to the TSA agent in Miami who thought that it was specifically funny when he repacked the box after inspecting my cylinders to put the granola bars first and then the tanks on top. So when I arrived in Madagascar, instead of granola bars, I had just regular muesli, which in a place without milk is really not an efficient way of consuming oats. Good. Then always in El Toro, we take at least 1 day break, mostly due to logistics because we have to drive some way to get the tanks filled, which by the time we get back to the city or the town, everything is already closed. So we spent the next day to get the tanks filled, to prepare again all of the equipment, and then the following day we're back exploring. So now we are again on the way to the dry cave. Diving equipment is about the same. Climbing equipment and other thing got less, so you can basically see that the dry bag that I'm carrying with me is getting like smaller and smaller, and also much easier to handle. Once we're at the dry cave, the climbing starts. Now, I wouldn't call the climb difficult, to be honest, but then also I've been climbing a lot when I lived in Austria, but it's certainly not easy, specifically with an 80 cubic foot tank on your back. So Phillip is from Paris and New York, so his skills in rock climbing are maybe not up to par. So we made the decision that it would be safer for me to bring all of the equipment over, which, well, yeah, when it was only 4 tanks, it was one thing. When it was more than 6 tanks and equipment, it was another thing. I think the longest time I ever took to cross all of the equipment from one side to the other was about 2.5 hours. It is approximately 15 meters, 50 feet of like pretty much straight up, then a little bit more up, which is quite easy. And then you have to clear a debris field, which is like about, I would say 40, 50, 60 meters, like 200 feet, which really the only it's even slightly downward angled. The only difficulty is that in this pile of rocks, the rocks are really loose. So before you put your foot, or before you apply pressure, you sort of have to kind of like check if the rock's going to roll over. If not, you're going to be stuck in that same situation that I had with my ankle getting bashed. So you're crossing over to the other side. In the same time, usually Phillip would be just waiting in the water, pretty clean his face. Well, I did all the heavy lifting. Of course, another thing. So you remember, I did only one wetsuit dive there, completely froze to death, hated it, and ever since then, I'm just going back in a dry suit. Now, the dry suit is awesome in the water. Don't get me wrong. It's not really the ideal decision to wear the dry suit while you haul heavy equipment over to the other side. So I can do approximately 2 trips before I get super hot, and then I have to jump in the water to cool down again. Which on several occasions I had just opened my dry suit zip a little bit to not get too much condensation inside my suit, and then forgot about closing it before jumping into the water, which created a lot of condensation in my suit. And then once done, I basically bring all of the cylinders over. So now you see basically that other pool of water. There's this little plateau there, so I bring all of the cylinders there, bring all of the diving equipment there. And then at the end, Phillip is coming over, rappels down into the water, and then I'm handing him the cylinders down one by one before I'm rappelling this last little bit. I don't know, you could definitely jump it from the top just to get back out would be quite tricky. And then we get dressed and off we go. So now we have the first time in new underwater territory in El Toro since years, basically. We don't know at all what to expect. And this is what we found. So it started off with a medium-sized tunnel filled with basically almost completely submerged in the halocline, just without that bacteria, so visibility was good. However, Phillip and I work as a team, so he is laying line and I'm surveying behind him. So I didn't really see it like that the first time. There was still a lot of percolation. So percolation is when somebody exhales. When a cave is unexplored, there's not only sediment on the floor, there's also a lot of sediment on the ceiling. So in a moment he exhales, he dislodges that sediment from the ceiling and it rains down on me. This mixed with the mixing of the halocline made me like really seeing exactly where I'm going. Also not getting an appreciation if we go through big cave or small cave, which is always makes you a little bit nervous as being the person that surveys because you don't know, like, did we find something cool? Is this going or is this not going? So the worst fear for the person that surveys is that the guy in front of you already turns around and comes towards you. So once you see his light pointing back at you, it's usually your heart drops and you get disheartened and it's like, oh no, we didn't. And this was sort of what happened here. After a pretty short distance, we came to another massive collapse that seemed to block the entire tunnel. We came out of the salt water in the freshwater. Phillip spent like 10, 15, 20 minutes to try to find a way around it and then gave up and came at me and said, like, dude, Patrick, this is it. This is a terminal collapse. And we can't pass that. So in that moment, I'm a bit more stubborn. And so I took the reel and poked around a little bit. And then ultimately about 2/3 up on the left-hand side of the collapse, I found this little weavy bypass. It's quite interesting because it's definitely smaller. There's some restrictions that you wouldn't be able to pass in doubles. And the most interesting part from my perspective was that, again, like I told you before, this is an active earthquake area. Okay, as a reminder again, remember, what is the biggest earthquake you remember from recent history? Haiti, right? We are literally driving, I don't know, like half a day from Haiti. So the thing is, first of all, every time something of your body touches the cave, it's like, uh-oh. And specifically when you have to tie off, you're like, can I tie off onto that rock or not? It's like this big Mikado game of like all of these boulders just balancing on top of each other. The reality is, the good news, if you make a bad move and like this, I don't know, several ton rock collapses on top of you, I guess it would be a pretty fast death. But there's always this part of me. I don't know if you've seen the movie 127 Hours. There's always like this part of me that thinks that the big boulder is going to collapse right on top of my leg and just trap me there. And I'm in excruciating pain. My leg is smushed and I just can't continue. And then I have to take my C knife and try to cut through my leg. I don't know. There's like all these weird things that go through my head in that moment. However, in that moment, as I'm weaving through this leg crushing boulder labyrinth, my experience sort of tells me I think that is it. I don't think this is going anywhere. Then I turned 90 degrees to the left, where I made the biggest tie-off in the history of all the tie-offs. I challenge anybody. I literally made a tie-off around a boulder the size of my car because it was the only thing around. Then I came down to the floor, and then there was a bedding plane. So bedding plane means pretty low ceiling to floor height, pretty wide though. And I saw a slope in front of me going back up, and I did a tie off there, and then I turned my head to the right, and kaboom! I do not have words to explain what is going through your head in a moment you discover something like that. I've tried it many times. Many people have asked me, so when you find it's going down, I don't know. There's so many thoughts rushing through my head. First of all, there's mostly this feeling of gratefulness because, hey, we live in 2000 something. And I'm one of the very few people that still gets to explore, discover, and map genuinely virgin parts of our planet that are not covered by satellite imagery or anything like that. And as I told you, it's this 5%, right? Like 95% we find nothing and it's all frustrating and horrible. But this 5% where you find something like this, sometimes there's so much emotion that as I lay line, I literally have to just lock the reel and put it on the floor, and I just ball my fists and I'm just like closing my eyes, biting on my teeth, and I'm just screaming. I'm like, dude, this is just mind blowing. And this is followed by picking the reel back up, looking at the absolute furthest point I can see, and then swim towards it like the devil himself is in my wake. So I'm hauling, thundering down the tunnel, feeling the reel unspinning in my hand. And for those of you who have done that before, in the moment the reel almost gets empty, there's so much rotation, it's so much RPM that you find like that resistance, and you hear the reel screaming from that noise. And dude, it's just like when you hear this, like, you're like, it's an absolute amazing sensation. In the same time, the tunnel is really cool. Until that point, like when you have many times, I get something that I call explorer envy. So I dive through a certain passage of cave, and I'm like, whoever discovered that must have been tripping, and I get a little bit jealous, but like in a positive way. I'm like, hey, really cool for that guy that he got to do this. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit jealous. So all the way to the dry cave, there's just so many cool sections. I'm like, wow, I wish I would have discovered this. Or I wish I would have discovered that. And then once we came to that one, I was like, wow, this is like just as good as the tunnels before, if not better. Of course, the if not better is my ego talking, wanting to have something that was better than the people before me. So don't take that too serious. In the same time, and again, the picture is really crap, but the water is still blue. The walls are white. The top part is light brownish, so makes me believe that at some point the halocline was like shallower, basically erasing the tannin from the white walls. And you have these major like boulders and debris beds and sediment beds on the floor, and you see the flow riffles. So you can literally see how this was like a completely and utterly flowing river. And I think it was Schiller Heinrich who says, the caves are like the veins of Mother Earth. And I don't know, specifically in a cave like this really kind of like sort of feels like that. And there's this other thing, like when the cave kind of like gets a bit smaller and then bigger again, and every time it gets a bit smaller, you go like, no, it's gonna stop, please don't do this. Like you have this inner monologue with yourself of like, please, don't let this stop, and then just bash away again. As a bit of a side information, so back in the day, we used to make types as far away as possible because time was always of the essence. Nowadays, with so great technology, we have sidemount rebreathers that don't weigh anything anymore, and we have digital mapping devices like the M-Nemo. So nowadays, we make like a lot of tie-ups because although it takes more time, but we're not restricted by time no more. And it makes the survey data that much more accurate, because you can imagine if you took a wrong compass heading on a 100-meter, 300-foot shot, and your compass was wrong by 5 degrees, imagine what it's going to be at the end of the 100 meters, right? So nowadays we make way more stations, and our survey accuracies really has gotten through technology much better than it was back in those days. Then ultimately, it sort of pinches down again a little bit, still looking super epic. Something that's kind of cool about this picture is if you look at my left side mount tank, you can still see all of the clay from transporting them in the dry cave. So it just brings home how dangerous clay is, because it is statically loaded. So it really attaches to your suit, it attaches to your tanks. And specifically on the way out, when your entire body is like covered in clay and you're scootering, you almost look like a shooting star with all like that clay trail that you have behind you. So it goes around the corner, and then guess what happens? It actually comes back up into another dry cave, which is really absolutely not what us wet cavers want to find. But basically at that moment, we had laid 1.2 kilometers between the last dry cave and this new last dry cave, about 4,000 feet. And yeah, but the good news was, so I tried to make my way around it at the bottom, but it was really clear that the cave had collapsed right in the middle of the tunnel, and that you had to get out of the water, climb up all the way to the end, and then see if it continues on the other side. However, I was not having my rubber boots with me, so it would have been completely impossible. No ropes or nothing. However, it looked pretty easy. Like looking at the slope, it looked like it's like 30 degrees, 40 degrees, pretty easy climb. So I was very positive that when we come back, it would be quite easy to scale that, climb on top of it, and then continue on the other side. However, my time in the DR at that moment had all but run out, and I had to come back to Mexico, back to Protect to teach cave diving and earn a living. So we would have to leave this project for yet another trip, which is always the worst thing for an explorer, not really knowing how it continues. Fast forward to 2015. Now, why didn't we go in 2014? Well, 2014 in March, we made the decision to put everything on one card and go to Madagascar and try to find a cave there, which felt really against all odds back then, considering that the southern part that has all the limestone is mostly desert or deserty. And we also didn't find nothing. Some of the beginnings of Madagascar, really not a lot of people know about, but we actually didn't find nothing. We stayed a month there and really had incredible long days, talks to I don't know how many villages, drove around with a Toyota 4Runner with no suspension, no air conditioning, with leather seats. It was horrific. And we didn't find anything that was going until pretty much about the last couple of days. And then we managed, through a lot of support by National Geographic and other people, to put a lot of equipment there and go there with a team. And that's another story. But so in 2015, finally, there was a chance again to return to the Dominican Republic and continue with that first really important project that Phillip and I had started together. So we put a crew together and off we went back into the water. Once we came to the first dry cave, we realized our lack of experience and knowledge about dry caving. So who knew that apparently using aluminum zinc covered carabiners are really not the perfect tool to be left in a dry cave for long periods of time, because guess what? Galvanic process is all but going to ruin it. In fact, if you look at the gate, that literally simply is about to disintegrate. Like when you press your thumb on it, it just rubs off on your hand. So I would not recommend anybody to fall or to hold on too hard to that. So obviously the better idea would have been to tie the rope straight into the anchors that are stainless steel, or use better quality carabiners. But anyways, you live, you learn. Then we still swam. We have never brought a scooter over. We still swam to the end of London again, and then we surfaced together in the dry cave. So this is basically how also I've experienced it and seen it the first time I ever came there, right? It looks pretty easy to walk up, right? Like 30, 40 degree angle. We didn't bring any ropes, no nothing, because it really looked that easy. We just brought the rubber boots and thought that was the way to go, and it shouldn't be all but a hard time. So obviously we brought the Dominican flag again. So I got out of the water, and approximately when I arrived in where I stand right now, I realized that it was not 30 degrees at all. That starting from there, it was like really steep. And that there was no clay. It was basically gravel-sized rock on a slope with some bigger rocks. So it's devastating because, again, right, remember what we said, be over-prepared. So somehow we messed that up. Somehow our team managed to come to a place, and then we didn't have the necessary equipment to continue, which is the worst. Anyways, I'm somewhat committed because, remember, it took us about 5 hours to get here. Right? Don't include the traveling and 5 hours to get right here. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna at least attempt to climb up. So I kept on moving fairly slowly, and Then managed to make it all the way to the top, which, as you can see, you can hardly see me. It's really pretty high, the collapse. And I managed to make it all the way to the top. The good news is, on the other side, it's a fairly easy walk down. So you walk down approximately 20, 25 meters, about 70, 80-ish feet. You walk back down a really easy slope. And in front of you is a drop off, which is another like 10 meters, 30 feet further down. And then you have a literally traffic tunnel shaped passage leading off in the exact same direction. So the cave continues for sure, but I couldn't see water yet. So I tried to take a stone and like skip it in the right direction and see or hear if I can hear some water sounds, but I didn't. And I stood at the edge at least 10 minutes contemplating to go to one of the corners, one of the edges, and try to chimney climb my way down. However, some thoughts came through my mind at the moment. First of all, it's not just me, right? There's also Phillip. If I hurt myself, so let's say during my climbing attempt, I fall and I hurt myself there, or I don't make it to climb back out, not only am I stranded and hurt and in a place where a rescue would be something that we would have to actually fly people in from abroad, but also Philip would be stranded because he cannot. I mean, he can climb the other dry cave on his own, but he's going to have a really hard time to do the same thing on his own with cylinders. So this is just one explanation or one scenario that clearly shows that the team or the importance of the team has always to outweigh the importance of the individual. And if you find yourself in a team where you doubt that one of the team members is able to make that call, I would strongly recommend you, no matter how bad you want to be in an exploration team, these people can put you, like your coolest part in your life is going to turn into your worst nightmare in a really split moment. So I made the really, really hard decision in that moment to turn around. The truth be told, if that thing would be on land anywhere, I would have climbed it for sure. But given the circumstances and where we were, I did not want to risk it, and then basically turned around and came back up. Really kind of like heartbroken, to be honest. So like, maybe heartbroken is the wrong word, but like, not feeling too great about myself. This feeling was replaced by complete and utter terrifying fear a couple of moments later when I took a wrong step and then basically caused a semi-avalanche of rocks that took me with them. So I slid down, not very far, but trust me, it was enough to get my heart seriously racing, specifically because the avalanche ended in the water where Phillip is waiting, right? And the space is not very big. So there's also this, there was literally a moment when I thought I should tell him to go back underwater just to make sure that he would not get hit by a debris that comes down the slope. But mostly I had my father's voice in my head. So I did quite a bit of mountaineering with my dad, and whenever we would come down a gravel slope like that, of like small pebble rocks that would be leaning on top of each other, he would always tell me, keep your weight back, keep your weight back, keep your weight back. So keep your weight close to the mountain. So I just had this reoccurring thought, my dad's voice, like keep your weight back, and I'm like half sliding, half walking down. So basically, by the time I came to the water, I was really disheartened about that we didn't have the possibility to continue. But at the same time, I was incredibly grateful that I was back in the water in one piece with no broken ankle. Philip made the decision in that moment, basically in that moment straight away, that we are going to abandon any further exploration efforts in El Toro until we would have at least one more team member that can do that dry cave bit in the middle, and also that would be able to assist in a potential rescue if somebody would like hurt his ankle or his knee or his leg. So, and that we would have to have scooters at this dry cave. And so basically we decided to stop exploration there until we would have a better formed team to be able to face the challenge of continuing exploration there. And yeah, that was in 2015. So imagine it has been 5 years that this end of line is in my head. I can't wait for this COVID thing to be over at some point, hopefully. And it would be definitely one of the main projects on top of our list, because now we have the team and we have the resources to do it. And of course, through the financial catastrophe, it would be like, as far as exploration goes outside of Mexico, definitely. I mean, here in Mexico, we pay like nothing for exploring, but outside of Mexico, that would be for sure like the only feasible thing. And I need to get my exploration fix, hopefully, at some point. But yeah, well, this was already the story of El Toro. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned maybe something a little bit about some things, or maybe you just laughed a little bit and I could change your day-to-day routine at the moment with the quarantine. So thank you very much for tuning in and for listening to me. I'm going to try and put another live together fairly quickly about some deep diving explorations that we have done in the Dominican Republic. So caves that are like in part deeper than, or currently 110 meters, so close to like 350 feet in depth. And the logistics of that being pretty far up in the Dominican mountains, and some other stuff that we did there. So I'm trying to throw this together. There's also this other talk I want to do about the history of or the recent history of side mounting, specifically Mexican involvement in it. I'm still waiting on a couple of people. Steve Bogarts, if you hear this, please, you still owe me those pictures and a little bit of text. So I'm still trying to put that together. And then I'm going to stream that also at some point, which might be quite interesting. Also the differences between Florida and Mexico, and some experience there. And to finally close all of this, again, I want to take a brief moment to thank all of the people that have supported us so far through this crisis and helped me as one of the owners of Protect to be capable of taking care, or us, the owners of Protect, to be able to take care of our staff. We haven't fired anybody yet. In fact, which by the way is what everybody else does. Like all the hotels here, everything that is in tourism, dives, like they all just flat out fired everybody. There's few exceptions that I'm aware of. We made the decision we don't want to fire absolutely nobody. In fact, we even put a couple of family members that were like working as, most of you maybe know El Tio, for example. Family members from Rosalba and the Garcia family, and we try to put them on basic salary also, so they can pay rent and they can pay food. So any support from you is obviously crazy appreciated. So good, that's already all from my side. I hope you have a good rest of the day. If you have any questions about the DR, how can you go dive there, or any questions to my talk, just maybe just send me a private message, and I'm going to try to answer those in the next couple of days. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.